Today is Sunday, May 31st. First, welcome to everyone joining us from yesterday's workshop. This morning, I'm going to talk about one's sense of self and how it can be transformed through Zen practice. But first, let's take a look at how we usually think about ourselves. And that is as an identity. Each one of us has a self-identity. It's how you define yourself. So it includes all the personality traits, values and beliefs, physical attributes, skills, abilities, and life experiences that together you have come to see as that which comprises you, me, myself, I. So it's that which makes you unique as an individual and distinct from other individuals. That's what self-identity is about. And some of us find ourselves jockeying for position, trying to assert yourself as a person of a certain rank, let's say, or just trying to maneuver around others, all the other identities out there. When we let go of that sense of being in competition, that sense of ambition, it's so freeing. We experience our life more in harmony with everyone else. And this identity of ours, it's developed and fine-tuned over the course of our lifetime. It happens simply through being in the world, interacting with others, and all the experiences we have. Also, our exposure to media. And in that way, it also includes this self-identity. It also includes an image. This idea of there being an image, a face that we really want to portray to others in a certain kind of way. And some of us can put a lot of energy into that, to curating our self-image. How do others see me? How can I make myself look this way or that way in the eyes of others? And that's a concern that can really occupy our mind if we let it. And there too, it's so freeing to let that go. To just be present, to be in this life without clinging to self-preservation. And there's another aspect of self-identity as well. That goes beyond how we relate to other people. It's how we relate to ourselves. How you relate to yourself, which ultimately is not separate from how we relate to others. For example, it's a common phenomenon for us to internalize how others treat us. And that speaks to how one's sense of self can be shaped by exposure to racism, sexism, homophobia, and other kinds of prejudice. And when it happens in a repeated kind of way over the course of a lifetime, we can internalize it. We can think and act in ways that demean our own self-worth. Recently, a student of mine came to me, and he was completely at his wit's end because he could not and cannot stop judging himself, constantly beating himself up, telling himself, "I suck, I'm a loser, and my practice is going nowhere." And then he goes on to judge himself for having such judgments, which only makes him judge himself more. It's a doom loop. It's one I happen to be very familiar with in my own more than 25 years of practice. But the fact that he notices this pattern of layering thoughts upon thoughts about oneself, and also the fact that he recognizes that it's out of his control, that's actually really good. That's really promising. And so is being at his wit's end. It's promising because when we exhaust relying on the thinking mind, when we get to a point where we're just sick of listening to the same old record play about me and my sad sack self, or whatever the story is about. That's all part of the process of how our practice ripens, and there's no way around it. We all have to go through this. We need to learn for ourselves that thinking away thoughts does not work. Piling thoughts upon thoughts upon thoughts does not work. It only keeps us stuck in the same old pattern, the same old identification with thoughts. And that's the key word, identification. That we have thoughts, that we conjure up concepts about ourselves. That's really not the problem. It's our identification with all of that. It's the way we identify with thoughts, personalize them, hold on to them. That's the problem. We all have thoughts. It's what the brain does. And there are different kinds of thoughts that we encounter on a daily basis. Some are simply a response to our environment, to what's happening around us, to other people. So some are very spontaneous, while others are more deliberate, like when we need to plan ahead. Solve a problem, use our creativity or imagination. But then there's this other category of thoughts that I want to focus on, and that's the thoughts about oneself. And the premise behind thoughts about oneself is that there is a self, not just a self, but a solid, fixed, unchanging self. And the primary subject of these thoughts is how I feel about me, how I feel about myself. And the way we experience them often is as self-talk, an inner dialogue, also known as intrapersonal communication. We all do it. Me and my self-worth, me and my values and beliefs, me and my goals, my success and my failures. Me in relation to others. We make ourselves the centerpiece. And when it comes to thoughts about oneself, there's interestingly plenty of research that shows that there's a natural leaning toward negative judgment, critical thoughts about the self. The human brain has what's known as a negativity bias. A negativity bias, what is that? It means that we are hardwired to feel and hold on to negative thoughts more intensely than positive ones. And it's something that we all have to make peace with because there's a evolutionary basis for it. The theory goes is that negative emotions like anxiety and fear for our early human ancestors served an important purpose in alerting them to potential danger, potential risk, keeping them out of harm's way from, say, potential predators or warring tribes. But it's different for us modern humans because we live in a relatively much safer world compared to them. May not feel that way to us. So we experience this negativity bias in a different kind of way. It feels like it operates on overdrive. Doesn't always serve a useful purpose, as it once did. So we experience then negative thoughts as intrusive. And aside from that biological hardwiring towards negativity, it's also part of our social and cultural conditioning. That too can have a negative slant. I recently listened to a Radiolab podcast titled You and Me and Mr. Self-Esteem. And it sheds some insight on this habit of judging oneself negatively. The podcast looks at the history, science, and social impact of what's known as the self-esteem movement. I never knew it was a movement until I listened to this podcast. And the reason why it's called a movement is that it's a way of thinking that especially in the 1980s and 90s, infiltrated many different aspects of civic life. Parenting, education, social services, corporate America, and even politics. There was even in the House of Representatives, a task force of the Ways and Means Committee devoted to promoting self-esteem. Especially in children. The belief was that this would solve a whole host of social problems that existed at the time. And I remember these problems because I came of age in the 1980s. Problems like drug use. You might remember the war on drugs. Unplanned pregnancy. Gang violence. Welfare dependency. It was assumed that kids who felt good about themselves would actually perform much better in school and in turn be more likely to succeed in life as adults, in their future education and in their careers. And as a result, there would be, over time, this really positive effect on society. All those social problems would go away. At face value, self-esteem sounds pretty good. It's a good thing to have. It is a good thing to have a sense of self-worth, value, self-respect, confidence, and the like. These are all good things, and this is why a lot of people, a lot of agencies in government and in social services jumped on the bandwagon thinking that self-esteem is the solution. How do I think about myself? How do I feel about myself? In Zen, the core teaching is that each one of us is already intrinsically whole and complete, perfect, just as we are. From the very beginning, all beings are Buddha. That means our true nature is shining right now, just as it always has been. It's nothing we need to get. It's who we already are. And speaking of that, why bother taking up Zen practice then? What are we doing here? Zen practice isn't about getting something or changing something about ourselves. It's about undoing the clinging to self, to the idea that we're static, we're stuck in place. Which, by the way, is what fuels our sense of self-identity. And also our tendency to judge ourselves and others. We don't need to add anything or change anything. But there's a lot to lose. And it's in that undoing where things can really open up. We make a space for qualities that are intrinsic to who we are. Our innate wisdom, compassion, gratitude, and love. In Zen, love, let's look at love. Love is understood not as an emotional attachment or a desire, a possessive desire, but as an expression of selflessness and deep interconnection. There's a Buddhist teacher and writer named Joanna Macy, who passed away last year. And one of her books has a wonderful title. It's World as Lover, World as Self. World as lover, world as self. And in it she wrote that just as lovers seek union, we are apt, when we fall in love with the world, to fall into oneness with it as well. we begin to see the world as belonging to us as intimately as our own bodies. I love that phrase, falling into oneness. Uniting with everything we encounter. People, objects, events. The sound of the bell, the song of the birds. Everything we experience, including oneself. To fall into oneness with oneself. This is not how we're conditioned. We're conditioned to see ourselves as separate and in conflict with others and also with ourselves. We're conditioned to see ourselves as a problem needing to be fixed, a failure, not smart enough, not attractive enough, too old, too fat, too clumsy, too distractible. So Zen practice is a process of loosening, undoing this knot that we've gotten ourselves into. Loosening or clinging to duality. But as the podcast I listened to explains, back to that, the podcast said that the message of the self-esteem movement was something entirely different. You just need to feel better about yourself. You just need to double down on being a self. Treat yourself as a self-help project. And again, it was just based on this idea that self-esteem is the key to success and happiness. Improving your performance, getting a better job, being more likable and attractive, etc. And it was all very appealing to public leaders, because forget about investing resources in making structural changes to education, employment, housing, and so on. All we need to do is implement a self-esteem curriculum in our schools. Costs a lot less money. So what it looked like in practice, and this is something I experienced growing up, and it continues to today, by the way. It just wasn't just in the 80s and 90s. It continues to be a cultural phenomenon. But what it looked like was showering kids with praise while minimizing and avoiding any negative feedback or judgment. Playing games where everyone wins, so no one feels hurt. Everyone gets a trophy. Problem at the time, and the problem still is, that there's no causal link. There's no scientific basis that connects success in life nor happiness with feeling good about yourself, with self-esteem. It actually has the opposite effect. It totally backfired in that what ended up happening, taken to an extreme, excessive self-esteem leads to narcissism, self-partiality, the very thing through practice that we're trying to undo. So in the context of the school curriculum, it encouraged an attitude of complacency, emotional fragility, not being able to handle feedback. Also, entitlement. And when I was a professor, I encountered this. I encountered so many students who were devastated, not just by earning a C, but even an A- on an exam or a paper. They would come into my office even crying, like they were a total failure. Sometimes they would bring their parents along with them for moral support. And I would have to explain to them that C means average. It's not a failure. A- means just short of outstanding. But they weren't convinced. And to this day, grade inflation is a phenomenon in our school system. There's pressure that comes not just from the students, but the parents and also the administrators to inflate grades. Whether the work performed warrants it or not. It keeps students happy and feeling good about themselves, keeps graduation rates high, which in turn helps secure funding. That's why the administrators had an invested interest in it. And the other thing is that there was this, and probably still is, this capitalist attitude that I'm paying for my education, and therefore I deserve an A. I'm paying for this. Just like we might find ourselves as Zen practitioners saying, I've been doing a lot of Zazen for years and years. I've gone to a lot of sesshins, working on the same koan. What's the payoff? What do I have to show for it? It's the same mentality. One of the reporters in this podcast, her name's Jennifer Crocker, put it this way. She said, "Self-esteem is the worst sickness known to humankind. Because when you succeed, you are great. But when you fail, you're shit. The podcast ends with calling for a shift in focus from how you feel about yourself to how you feel about what you do. How you feel about what you do. How you make yourself available. How you're responsive to other people, to the needs of others. And this involves a simple shift in awareness. It's a shift away from me and myself and towards being in the world. Getting the ego-driven self out of the way. And you know, the whole idea of there being a self to begin with, a self to judge, to defend, to be improved upon. To be defined by thoughts about itself. A self that exists separate, apart from all the other selves. It's all an illusion. Now that can sound like self-denial, right? To say that the self is an illusion. But that's not it at all. We're not denying the self. It's about freeing oneself from attachments. It's about shifting away from a self-centered life to one that is more expansive and more open. Seeing the self as much larger. Seeing the self as extending beyond our skin. As not having any borders or edges to it. The Canadian poet Michael Ondaatje describes this vast, wide self quite beautifully. He said, "Everything is collage, even genetics. There is a hidden presence of others in us, even those we have known briefly. We contain them for the rest of our lives at every border that we cross." In Zen, we often use the word interdependence or interbeing to describe this vast self. But without Zen practice, we can easily get caught up in the words themselves and only understand it at a conceptual level. Zazen, daily practice, and also sesshin when possible. This is what enables us to experience our intrinsic self. Not as a concept, but to really experience it. That's what happens when thoughts settle and we tune into being in a body, being in the world, being present now. That can only happen if we let go of this desire to be the centerpiece of life. It can only happen if we decenter the small self so we can access the larger one. There's a wonderful quote by Tongan Harada Roshi. Actually, a student of mine came upon this and told me about it just a few days ago, and she found it to be an incredibly powerful image. And it describes the nature of our self, our true self, to be like the rushing water of a waterfall. So it comes from a collection of teachings titled Throw Yourself into the House of Buddha. Again, Tongan Harada Roshi. He says, from a distance, a waterfall appears solid. But when you look closely, you see that it is in constant movement, continuous change, rushing like a cascade of long white rope. It seems to be there always, but it is not solid. The water that you see in the waterfall has already rushed to the great ocean. Life is alive. It's not stagnant, and it's not solid. It has no self-nature. So the self has no self-nature. That doesn't mean that you and I don't exist. It just means that we're not separate. And we're not static. Everything's in motion. It's kind of like osmosis. There's a body. There's a set of characteristics that it has. And yet, there is no border or edge to it. It's permeable, fluid. And all that's needed to access this sense of self, again, is a shift in our awareness. And it's a choice we need to make over and over again, moment by moment. It's not one and done. We need to work with our biological and social conditioning. All of us. Moment by moment. And that's how our life can truly radically transform. Not by changing how we think, but by being who we are. We'll stop here and recite the 4 vows.